Hello and welcome to this short tutorial on how to actually taste coffees. I know a lot of people struggle with describing flavor and describing taste, so I thought I would teach you a little bit how to start to learn how to taste coffees. The best thing you can do is actually to taste with another person and to discuss what you're tasting. But before you do that, you need to kind of learn a little bit what are the different flavors. So the best way to start learning the basic tastes is to actually use water, sugar, some citric acid or lemon juice, and then maybe an orange peel. So what I recommend you do is to take a little cup of water, add a little bit of sugar, and then you have water without sugar, and then you can taste what sweetness tastes like. And then you have a third cup with some lemon juice inside, and then you can taste what acidity tastes like. A lot of people confuse bitterness and acidity, and they come to us and say, oh, your coffee is really, really bitter. All coffees are bitter, but our coffees are quite light roasted, so they're a little bit higher in acidity than, for instance, a darker roast, which would be a little bit more bitter. And then to understand what bitterness is, I highly recommend just eating some orange peel or drink Campari or something like that, and then you will feel bitterness straight away. You can also feel bitterness when you drink very dark roasted coffees, because that kind of burnt flavor tastes quite bitter. But it's not the same as acidity, which is more the kind of tingling sensation you get on the side of the tongue. So once you've kind of done that exercise, water with sugar, water with lemon juice and orange peel, and taste that, you can describe more easily sweet, sour, bitter. Of course you can taste salt as well if you want, but saltiness in coffee is not that common. And then you have umami, which is more like a richness, which is more common in kind of mushroom garums and stuff like that. So, and also you can get in fermented coffees for sure. But for me, focus more on acidity, bitterness, and sweetness. That's kind of what we're doing when we do basic tasting. So all you need to start tasting coffees are actually more than one coffee. So I have on my table today instant coffee that is quite dark roasted, and it's also a Robusta coffee. It can be literally anything, but preferably maybe some low quality coffee. It doesn't matter if it's stale or old, just something to compare it with. And then I have a beautiful Kenyan coffee that is freshly roasted. It's really high quality, and I know what to expect from this coffee. And then I have a Honduran coffee, also freshly roasted, high quality. It's a Catuai cultivar, so I know what to expect from that coffee as well. The first thing you do when you start tasting coffee is normally to smell the grounds. And if you want to learn how to set up a cupping, we have a tutorial on YouTube and our website. But it's basically 11 grams of coffee in this cup, and we're going to fill it with 180 grams of boiling water. Just use a scale and it's easy to measure up. But the first thing you do is to smell. And sometimes it's hard to describe because you only smell coffee, but if you compare it to the next cup, there's definitely a difference in smell here. This one smells a lot more fruity, whereas this, for me, smells more like going to a coffee shop or something like that. It smells like coffee. It smells a little bit like melted chocolate. This one, instant coffee, doesn't really smell that much. Maybe a little bit of caramel. Now we're going to get the water on, and then we're going to let it rest for a little bit, and then we're going to start tasting together. So the coffees are now ready to be tasted, and if you're doing this with a friend, which I highly recommend, it's not dangerous. There's no right or wrong here. People have different references when it comes to tasting and also flavor kind of descriptions, because we have different cultural backgrounds and different upbringing. So we do have different references, so there's no right or wrong when you say this tastes like chocolate or this tastes like nuts. But before we get to that, I would like you to focus more on tasting acidity, checking out the mouthfeel. How does it feel in the mouth? The bitterness, the sweetness, and so on. So normally when I taste coffee, I take a little spoon. You can put it in a cup. And you taste. I like to spit because during a day it becomes a lot of coffee. But what kind of struck me immediately here was that the coffee was quite bitter. Now this was a quite dark roasted coffee. It's also a Robusta coffee. And that means it has a lot of bitterness, both from the roast and also from the coffee. There's not a lot of sweetness in this coffee, because it doesn't really hit the middle of my tongue. The aftertaste is very short, and it's also quite bitter. and it's very low in acidity. And if that's difficult for you to assess, then first of all, focus on bitterness. Taste this coffee. For sure, very bitter. Taste the next coffee, which is a high quality Kenyan coffee, which is a lighter roast. Compared to the first one, almost no bitterness, but much more high acidity. Very, very easy to compare, because this has very low acidity, this has very high acidity. Now let's taste the Catuai from Honduras. And immediately, much lower acidity than the Kenyan, but still higher than the Robusta instant coffee. So this is kind of how I taste coffee. First, focus on bitterness, focus on acidity, focus on mouthfeel. Let's go through the mouthfeel. So with the Robusta, actually feels quite watery and thin, although it's a high concentration. I mean, I've measured the TDS in the coffee. It feels very watery and thin. There's not a lot of texture to this coffee. The Kenyan, it's a little bit more texture to it, a little bit smoother, not as rough as this one, and it feels kind of a little bit oily and juicy, like mouth-watering. The Catuai from Honduras, feels very creamy, like you're eating cream, you know. Texture is like skim milk is very thin texture, cream is very thick texture. So that's kind of the mouthfeel we're tasting now. So mouthfeel is also for me very important. A coffee doesn't have to have a high or thick mouthfeel. It can also be a slim and elegant coffee, but it needs to have more attributes that backs that up. So with the slim and elegant coffee, I probably prefer higher acidity and more aromatics like floral and fruity notes. Let's taste the sweetness in these coffees. Again, Robusta instant coffee. Not very sweet. Robusta coffee is famous for being quite bitter and low sweetness, and this is no exception. With the Kenyan, I can feel that it's high acidity, but there's a lot of sweetness there that kind of balances it out. So when you think of ripe fruit, that's very sweet, but unripe fruit is not sweet, but very high acidity. Ripe fruit is also acidic, but it's sweet, so it's more balanced. So when you make lemonade, for instance, if you only have lemon in the water, it's quite acidic. If you put sugar in, the same acidity level, but you balance it out with sugar, and then it's drinkable. And then the Catuai for sweetness. Find it very sweet. It's kind of growing in the mouth. Delicious. When it comes to aftertaste, this is also very important for me, because after you drink a cup of coffee, you want to kind of feel the good flavor in your mouth for a long time. So with the instant coffee, the aftertaste is there, but it's very much in my throat because it's a lot of bitterness. And it's not a very pleasant aftertaste. It's quite rubbery, a little burnt. It tastes like roasted corn, like popcorn, burnt popcorn. So it's not a very pleasant aftertaste. Bitter, it dries out the mouth, and it's a little bit astringent. That means you kind of feel like you're drinking over-extracted black tea. That's what astringency is. With the Kenyan, the aftertaste is not as long-lasting as some other coffees that I have, but it's kind of a medium-lasting finish. It's quite refreshing and not as lingering as maybe the Catuai I expect to be, but still it's quite a pleasant aftertaste. It's a lot of fruit flavor, and I still feel a kind of sugary sweetness in the aftertaste. And let's taste the Catuai for the aftertaste. Yeah, this really sticks in the mouth. It's not bitter, it's very, very sweet, long-lasting, and I can really feel that kind of chocolatey flavor. A little bit of herbal flavor as well, but it's quite chocolatey and nutty, and it's lasting a long time. So this is kind of how I do basic tasting. I focus on acidity, bitterness, mouthfeel, aftertaste, and of course flavor. That's the easiest thing. Most of you are focusing on that, but I suggest that you focus on that the last. And now let's do a little flavor comparison. So, Robusta. Roasted corn, burnt popcorn, leather, rubber. Not very pleasant. Let's taste the Kenyan. I feel like rosehip tea, Flor de Jamaica or hibiscus tea, a little bit of red berries, black currants, refreshing, tart, a little bit kind of grape-like. That's what that tastes like, to me at least. And then the Catuai. Milk chocolate, a little bit roasted nuts, dried fruits, a slight hint of bell pepper when I compare it to the Kenyan, but that in a pleasant way. And green bell pepper, I mean. And that's my reference. If you're from a different country, you might say different things. For instance, if I taste strawberry in a coffee, and I taste that coffee with a person from Honduras, normally they will say mango instead. That's fruit that tastes quite similar, but the strawberries in Honduras is not as ripe and delicious as here in Norway for sure. So we do have different references, and it's okay to use different words for it. And it's only for you a tool for you to remember what the coffee you tasted tastes like, so you can discuss it with other people. That's basically how we taste coffee, and I really hope you enjoy this. If you want to become a great taster, it's not just about tasting coffee. You should also taste different cheese, different beer, different juice, different wine, different whatever you can find. That's the best way to train. And train with other people. It's much more fun and enjoyable that way. Good luck!